Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Think Tank.
Welcome to a new episode of Mena Talk. My name is Jasmin Arémi, editor at Mena-Watch, and our guest today is Tobias Huch, a freelance Middle East journalist and YouTuber. Tobias Huch is known for his connection to Kurdistan as a long-standing political and humanitarian supporter, and that's exactly what we want to talk to him about today. So what exactly were you doing last month in Kurdistan, in Rojava?
I brought humanitarian aid supplies over. There was, due to the attack by the Islamists, the HTS and the SNA, some very, very terrible scenes and a small humanitarian catastrophe. And then I collected donations, and I then did some shopping in Erbil. That included not only food packages, but also toys for children. And then, by the end, we had successfully moved 7 trucks across the border over to Rojava, and subsequently we distributed those essential goods to people in need in Derik, Kamishlo, and across the entire region there.
The situation hasn't exactly relaxed again recently, has it? Now,
because of the other side, because of the mullahs in Tehran. They bomb Kurdistan every single day, and you hear almost nothing about it in the German media, which is quite concerning.
In Germany, the media rarely covers Kurdistan, and what's reported is often distorted, oversimplified. There are few experts. There's Dusan Tekal, with whom we've discussed this, and there's you.
Dusan is probably the expert who could effortlessly outperform me with her extensive knowledge, and she likely would, easily putting me to shame, truly showcasing her mastery. Therefore, if there's ever something I don't know, she is absolutely my primary contact. The second person would be Alfred Hackensberger, who is Die Welt's Middle East correspondent. Those are, I believe, the 2 foremost experts that I would indeed recommend, yes.
What false assumptions about Kurdistan are circulating here in Germany?
Oh, so many. First, people ask, where is Kurdistan? Some only know it from Karl May. Politically, Kurds are automatically put into the PKK category. However, the Kurdish people are politically extraordinarily diverse. And people don't really have a proper way to classify them. However, that improved since 2014 because the Kurds defeated ISIS, whether it was the HPG, YPG, YPJ fighters, or the Peshmerga combatants. And because of that, the Kurds, I believe, generally have a very positive image in Germany and Europe overall. And now the crucial question is whether they will finally be duly compensated for having protected us here in Europe, because without the Kurds, the situation in Europe would undoubtedly be very, very different, and we would have suffered hundreds more terror attacks.
The commitment you have with your aid associations definitely goes a bit beyond a symbolic humanitarian aid organization like the Gaza Flotilla.
That's perfectly fine. The Gaza Flotilla, they're truly not concerned with aid at all. I mean, they didn't even have any humanitarian aid supplies on board. I think there were...
few packs.
Yeah, it really felt like it was only maybe 3 or 4 meager bags of flour, and the rest of it they just greedily devoured themselves on that boat. And then somewhere in all that, Anissa Amani was there, being quite annoying. So it's very difficult. So very, very disgusting people.
Above all, how does that really strike you, considering you yourself travel to these very crisis regions and genuinely deliver humanitarian aid where it's truly essential?
They were, in one way or another, mocking. They mocked the people in Gaza. There are people suffering, especially because Hamas also intercepts aid supplies and things like that. And war is always awful, and children particularly suffer from it. That's beyond any question. But then, nobody needs 20 or 30 boats filled with complete idiots on board, yelling anti-Semitic things and offering absolutely no help whatsoever. But rather, just hoisting a Palestine flag, thinking we're solid. I mean, I genuinely don't believe you could possibly mock those people there, or exploit their suffering any more egregiously than that. I consider this Gaza Flotilla to be one of the most inhumane projects that we witnessed last year. And now they're preparing to embark once more, even as in Iran. As many as 50,000 people, civilians, women and children, have been brutally gunned down in the streets by the regime. While in Yemen and Sudan, hundreds are literally starving to death every single day. They want to embark on their Mediterranean cruise once more, taking pleasure in mocking the plight of the people in Gaza. For someone who is actually involved in humanitarian aid, it's just appalling. And these people, and everyone on that flotilla, and everyone who plans it, should be cancelled and deeply despised.
There were also enough people on the flotilla with problematic networks in the background.
Exactly. The support for Hamas, coming from Tehran through the mullahs and also from officials within the Hamas terror group, is quite evident, isn't it? And it's not without reason that some of them have now been arrested in Tunisia for donation fraud. And I believe the population in Egypt indeed gave parts of this Gaza procession the proper reception it rightfully deserved. They certainly beat them all up, yes. So the Muslims in Egypt asked, "Why are you making fun of the people in Gaza? And now you're going to get a taste of the whip." I truly had no pity for these individuals because they really should have learned by now not to simply overlook the suffering of others, especially not just to glorify themselves. We saw it at the Oscars too. All these self-promoters who don't know where Gaza or Israel is just shout "Free Palestine" on stage. Then in the back of their minds they're thinking, "I hope I get a bigger ad deal and can pocket a few more million."
You were just there on site very recently. Now, of course, the conflict in Iran has escalated, becoming far, far worse. From your perspective, which Kurdish regions are currently the most vulnerable and in the greatest need of support, I would ask?
Yes, there are two regions. So, we have Rojava, which is located in the northern and eastern parts of Syria. The situation in the camps there is very, very tense. But humanitarian aid has been needed there since 2014, and nothing has arrived so far. Germany did apparently deliver aid to Syria. Surprisingly, all of those aid supplies made a huge detour around the Kurdish areas. And today, the situation remains exactly the same. In Rojilat, the regime continues its persecution of the people. They are also suffering. Many have sought refuge in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. However, the camps of the respective parties that took in the people, specifically the PDKI, the PAK, and Kamala, are regularly subjected to bombing. These are highly targeted attacks by the mullahs in Tehran against refugees, and this is precisely where assistance is desperately required.
So specifically, how would you describe the current relationship dynamics between the Kurdish forces and the Iranian regime at this very moment?
They are indeed hostile. By now, all Kurdish forces have successfully united in a formidable coalition and are now firmly standing against the mullahs. But now, everyone is simply waiting to see how things further unfold, and whether Donald Trump will finally follow through with this, or if he will back down and retreat once more. He asked the Kurds for help. Luckily, they responded, "Yeah, not so fast with that one," because he has betrayed them on numerous occasions. He abandoned them in Rojava. He left them in the lurch before that. And the US, after all, has a long history of simply screwing over the Kurds.
Is there any indication now that something will happen soon? Are certain forces currently forming, or are people just simply waiting?
One simply waits. There's truly nothing else that can be done. We also have to consider, even if the regime falls, what will happen afterward and what part the Kurds will play. Will Iran truly transform into a state with various federal regions where ethnic minorities are given due consideration, or will the Kurds once again face renewed oppression? Or how do you say it, the Azerbaijanis, who are also a very significant minority group? We also have the Baloch people on the other side. And then it becomes difficult to supply these forces with weapons, for example. With the Kurds, it's still somewhat possible. But with the Baloch, it then becomes really difficult. Imagine, if you will, the US arming the Baloch people after the regime has fallen. One could assume that those weapons would then be turned against Pakistan, and that's something no one can really allow to happen. And simultaneously, Pakistan stands as a crucial potential ally, capable of confronting the mullahs should Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, finally lose patience and declare, "All right, I'm activating our military alliance." Then we would suddenly have a robust, effective military force taking action against Tehran, which I personally would consider to be a very positive and welcome development. That would be the great hope, because then you'd also see who takes which side. Currently, people like to claim, well, if you're a Muslim, you have to defend the mullahs. That's absolutely the opposite is true. So, If someone truly harbors hatred for Islam or disdain for Muslims, then I can definitely comprehend why they would align themselves with the mullahs. I can't understand anyone else, because what the ayatollahs and the mullahs in Tehran have done, that's actually the greatest advertising campaign for Islamophobia. That is essentially the largest, most extensive propaganda program promoting hatred towards Islam. If a government actually manages to legalize the sexual assault of children. But where is the outrage in that case? There's justified outrage regarding Epstein. But the mullahs and ayatollahs in Iran have completely transformed the entire nation into an Epstein island. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of rapes of children every year, and somehow nobody cares.
You touched on it briefly at the start, but the subject of Kurdistan really provokes far-right Turkish groups, such as the Grey Wolves and so forth. So, where exactly does this originate? And what underlying dynamics are at work here?
I think with the Grey Wolves, it's an inferiority complex. They, especially here in Germany, when you have nothing else to be proud of, then you fall back on your heritage. And that's how it is. Then it is based quite simply on the notion, on this belief that one belongs to a master race. We know that very well in Germany, and this type of ideology, this fascist ideology, is what you find with the Grey Wolves. And there, Kurds, Armenians, Alawites, Jews, and Yazidis are then transformed into the enemy figures, those to be hated. And those are cultivated, and Turkish domestic politics under Erdogan also wants to get its votes from there. And so the Kurds are seen as an enemy because they also embrace a much more modern way of thinking and do not uphold this patriarchal system, which is a major point of contention for them. And we see it, in the demonstrations or rallies that are happening. Let's take a look at the Palestine rallies that have taken place in Berlin over the last 2.5 years. I don't believe there has been a single one that was entirely non-violent. In and of themselves, these are always just crime demonstrations. And on Saturday, we celebrated the Kurdish New Year, and there were 2 very large rallies held then. There was a major one held in Frankfurt, on the Rebstock grounds, drawing an attendance of over 50,000 people. There were no crimes, everything was peaceful, hardly any police around, it was all fantastic. And there was a massive one with 100,000 people in Bonn. There were hardly any police, everything was peaceful, no crimes. I mean, I'd like to see somebody show me that kind of peacefulness at other rallies, honestly. I genuinely believe that even German folk festivals are significantly more susceptible to criminal acts than any Kurdish festival would ever be.
Kurdish festival, a great segue to our next topic. You were in Bonn.
Yes.
Maybe you could briefly explain what it's all about, what was being celebrated, because I think most people are completely unaware of it unless they're part of that bubble.
Yes, so Newroz is being celebrated, which is the Kurdish New Year. Other people celebrate it similarly, for example, Nowruz, which is celebrated by the Persians. There's always a debate about who it came from. In the end, it probably comes from the same source, and then the 2 festivals just develop differently. Well, among the Persians, you'll definitely find things like apples, along with wheat sprouts, and all sorts of other interesting items. And, well, the thing with the goldfish, I don't think that happens much anymore, having a live fish in a glass. That's how things were in the past. And the entire house is meticulously cleaned. That's for the Persians. But for the Kurds, it's all about the ancient legend of Kawa, the blacksmith who bravely defeated a ruthless tyrant. He was a blacksmith who worked tirelessly with both iron and fire, and in the enduring tradition of liberation from tyranny, Kurds traditionally leap over roaring bonfires and ignite celebratory fires, symbolizing their resistance and freedom. And yes, that is also a profoundly political festival, precisely because it embodies the spirit of resistance against tyranny, if you understand.
It's also about the visibility of Kurdish concerns, especially here in Germany.
Exactly, you also have the flag of Kurdistan, of course, and often the flags of the parties. Now, we saw a division there. In Frankfurt, it was predominantly very left-wing Kurds with distinct communist leanings. This included supporters of the PKK, or the fighters of the YPG and YPJ, or Kamala. It's quite strongly celebrated there, whereas in Bonn, it was a much more diverse crowd. There were many from that bubble, but especially many from the Kurdistan region, whether Talabani or Barzani, so PDK and PUK, who are politically more closely tied to the German federal government or the Federal Republic at large. They were really celebrating there. I also saw many pictures of Qazi Muhammad. He is the founder of the Republic of Kurdistan in Mahabad, which was later brutally suppressed under the Shah, and everyone there was tragically killed. And there, they very beautifully advocate for the unity of all Kurds with the powerful slogan, 2 + 2 is 1. So that means there isn't a Kurdistan of Turkey or an Iraqi Kurdistan, rather there is only Kurdistan. And then you no longer say, though it was said in the past, you no longer say, I am a Kurd from Turkey, but instead, I am a Kurd from Kurdistan.
The Kurdish diaspora is really very well connected and sticks together well. What role does this festival in particular play?
It's the most important celebration. The absolute most important is Newroz. Actually, no other comes to my mind right now. It is simply the most centrally significant festival, and it's celebrated even amidst staunch resistance in Turkey, or within those territories I'll term as occupied. For instance, the city of Ahmed, though the Turks refer to it as Diyarbakir, it is indeed Ahmed, serves as Ahmed is essentially the unofficial capital of all Kurds, and there are regularly Newroz rallies held there with as many as 1 million people participating.
What is the current perspective on Iran from the diaspora here in Germany? Could you provide a brief assessment of that, please?
People are concerned and they're also waiting. At the festival, I also had the opportunity to speak with representatives of the PDKI, which are the Democratic Party of Kurdistan of Iran, Qazi Muhammad's original party. And, of course, they'll be happy if the mullahs get bombed away. I believe that every civilized person throughout all of Iran would genuinely rejoice and be quite pleased. It is truly one of the rare situations, I believe, where a populace actually rejoices that their own country is being subjected to bombing. And in hindsight, we also must acknowledge that it isn't inherently a negative thing. When I look back today at the Third Reich, I, as a German, genuinely feel it was exceptionally good that we were bombed.
And that's a comparison that many exile Iranians definitely make as well.
Yes, and the people who say that's not good. Yes, they would have just let Hitler have his way and do as he pleased. One always ends up talking about the neighbors, but the Kurds are also constantly constrained, caught between their enemies. And they are well aware of that, which is precisely why the saying goes, no friends but the mountains. It's a poignant truth for them. However, I delivered a speech where I highlighted this very point, and it's a message that every single Western leader truly needs to internalize. The Kurds have consistently proven themselves to be exceptionally dependable and trustworthy partners. There's a saying, Kurds are like fire. Approach them as a friend and they will warm you, but approach them with hostility and they will burn you. And similarly, I had also quoted a military observer, a German, who later became Field Marshal von Moltke. He had journeyed through Anatolia for the German Empire, observed the Kurds, and declared, if the Kurds stood together, they would be unconquerable. And if a Field Marshal von Moltke himself states that, then there must be some truth to it.
To what extent do you believe the Kurdish cause could genuinely assist in bringing about regime change in this particular situation, in your opinion? Is it a vital building block? Is it something that absolutely must occur?
It is an extremely crucial element, particularly if the key leadership is eliminated and if the Revolutionary Guard has been considerably weakened. However, this also involves something that unfortunately many tend to overlook, the destruction of the proxies. Because if the Kurdish forces cross that border, they'll be confronted by militias such as Hashd al-Shabi, which are undeniably under the influence and control of Iran. And they are indeed the ones who constantly bomb Erbil. And as long as these militias in Iraq aren't eliminated, it remains extremely perilous for the Kurds to intervene there, because the exact risk they might suddenly face is simply incalculable and too dangerous to even contemplate.
To conclude, I'd like to touch upon something more pleasant, your avenues for support the assistance you readily provide. How can someone support the Kurdish cause? What forms of help do you provide there?
Also, when it comes to refugee aid there in the region, you go to liberate.de. Perhaps it's best to link it below this conversation. It is the Liberal Refugee Aid Organization, and that is where you can make your donations. It's a non-profit organization, so for a large donation, you'll also get a donation receipt. But I think nowadays, for anything up to 300 euros, a bank transfer receipt will always suffice. You can then submit that to the tax office, and that's how we help. For this Easter, we've organized a special small aid campaign together with the Archbishop of Erbil, specifically designed for the Christians residing there in Ankawa, which, as you know, is a district of Erbil, also known as Hola. And we do this regularly. We're essentially like a small, quick response fire department. People call us when help is urgently needed, so it arrives quickly. And as for the larger operations like the big camps, those are typically managed by NGOs or major organizations such as the UN Refugee Agency. Yes, but we have been actively involved on the ground for almost 12 years now, and we have no administrative overhead whatsoever. Administrative overhead. This means every cent practically gets through and none of us receives a salary. We do all of this voluntarily, and it's working quite well that way.
We will gladly link to it so that people can get more information there. Then thank you for these clear and important perspectives and for the insight into the Kurdish New Year especially, which probably hardly anyone knows about.
You should definitely remember that for when New Year comes around again, Newroz Piroz B, that means Happy New Year. And in that way, even as a German, you can truly integrate yourself into the Kurdish community a little.
That sounds great. If you liked this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and to Tobias Huch's. Be sure to activate the bell, share this on social media, and find more analysis, background, and discussions regularly at Mena-Watch. I'm Jasmin Arémi. Thank you, and I'll see you at the next Mena Talk.
Mena-Watch, der unabhängige Nahost-Think Tank. Besuchen Sie auch unsere Website. Dort finden Sie täglich neue aktuelle Berichte und ausführliche wissenschaftlich fundierte Hintergrundanalysen zur Geschichte und Gegenwart der MENA-Region.